In this video we're going to be talking about cloud, and I know this is evil resurrected, but keep on watching, you might learn something new. Hey guys, I went shopping a couple of days ago. Well, I didn't go anywhere, I've opened AliExpress and I found this. This is a really cool e-ink display with a temperature and humidity and also luminosity sensor inside. So I thought, it would be perfect for my home automation. What I didn't check was the interface, and believing that I'm buying a Zigbee version, I ended up getting a Bluetooth one. Right about the same time, Tuya sent me a message introducing the Cloud API and asking me to make a video about it. So while I still have to wait another 2-3 weeks for the Zigbee version of this sensor to arrive so I could play with it, I thought that might be a good opportunity to talk more about Tuya Cloud API. And I know exactly what you're thinking. You're not interested in cloud because, well, cloud is evil and the only way forward with DIY automation is obviously hosting everything yourself. And if you follow this channel for long enough, you know that this is exactly what I'm doing, and that most of the services that I'm using are hosted on the Raspberry Pi. On this Raspberry Pi, to be precise, behind me. So why am I talking about Tuya API and why I want to show you how to work with Tuya API? Tuya is big. And I know it might not seem like it in the West, but I'm gonna throw some numbers at you. So they have over 324,000 developers for hardware and software. That's an immense amount of people working with Tuya already. And that means that Tuya can offer you right now over 310,000 different SKUs. And yes, that's a lot of different smart sockets that you can offer, but Tuya does it in over 1,100 different categories. And in terms of traffic, they handle 122 million AI voice requests a day and 84 billion cloud requests a day. So we can say they're pretty big, right? So why am I telling you all this? Because, well, just like me, you might be missing out on really good devices hardware-wise. Well, right now, if you want to go DIY path, you've got 3 options. Option 1, well, you can limit yourself in terms of hardware design and look only at the hardware manufacturers that caters to DIY users like me or you. Well, it's not ideal if you want the latest and the greatest gadgets. Option 2, you may wait until your favorite gadget is hacked by someone more knowledgeable and, well, described online how to perform such hack so you could use it in your home automation. That usually involves complicated process and that delay. And option 3 is something we're going to talk about today, which is taking control of the latest and greatest devices using API. And this is where Tuya comes in handy, because thanks to the Cloud API, you actually can connect to a lot of different devices, whether it's via Bluetooth protocol, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, etc. And it doesn't mean that you have to switch over from your established Home Assistant instance or NodeRED. It can be complementary until something better comes your way. And there is one more thing that no one from DIY automation enthusiasts wants to admit. We are a drop in a consumer's ocean, which means it's nice to see manufacturers catering to us, but we're not making them a bulk of our income. So if you found a device like myself that you really want to play with and it's either impossible to get it hacked for now or you just don't want to wait, working with API might be the solution to integrate it in your home automation until you find a better way to connect to it. And today I'm going to show you how to get started with API, how to get started with cloud connectivity from Tuya, and how to use Postman to make your job much easier, because Tuya actually took care of a lot of things to make that process quite simple. In this video I'm going to show you how to extract data from a sensor like this, and also how to check the status and enable controls over FingerBot, something that Tuya also sent me so I could showcase you the Cloud API. They're cute. These FingerBots from Adaprox are, well, small robots to press the buttons, something that is very similar to SwitchBot robots. You can check out the video in there. And yeah, They work over Bluetooth as well. They have a USB Type-C charging, and they're quite small and cute, so they're perfect to trigger small lights and switches. They work over Bluetooth, so I also have a corresponding hub to connect these bots into the Wi-Fi and then to Tuya Cloud API. The hub, apart from being automation station, it also has an infrared blaster inside, so you can use that to trigger TVs or hi-fi stations. As for sensor, I've mentioned that this is a Bluetooth sensor which measures temperature, humidity and luminescence. You also have a really cute e-ink display which is quite responsive. It has ability to respond to readings every 4 seconds and update the display, which is quite nifty because you don't have to look at your app or mobile phone to tell what the temperature is like. And thanks to the built-in luminosity, you can use that as a trigger and respond to different light levels in your room. Enough of the talk, let's get to action. First, you obviously have to register with Tuya IoT Platform, and you probably want to download Postman. Postman is optional, however it's a perfect tool to actually experiment with API really quickly without writing a single piece of code. So I strongly recommend you to do it because you can use that knowledge to transfer it to different cloud services and different APIs that you come across in the future. To make it easy, I've included the links in the description of this video, and additional information in my article is also linked in there. Also, as a bonus to you, I included a special link that if you use it, you'll get extra balance to your developer account if you want to get more out of your account. But don't worry guys, in regards to your personal home automation, there's more than enough quota to keep you going for a long time. And as we're working with Tuya Cloud API, you probably want to download Tuya app on your phone and register your account, because we're going to use that to send your devices from the app to your developer account so you can interact with them. To get started with Tuya, first obviously register your account. Now you can have a free trial edition, and that's going to be plenty for your use case. Navigate to Cloud and start a new project by clicking Create. Now I already have two, and the one I'm using is Home Automation. This is what's your basically cloud workspaces. You'll be given a set of credentials with your client ID and secret. Keep those safe because you're going to need them to create and obtain authentication token. I'll show you how to do it in a second, but first let's go through a quick overview. Now at first you're not going to see any of the devices in here. I'll show you how to add them. Before you do that, navigate to API and enable API. You can use Go to Authorize to do so. So this is the one I have enabled by default. Follow that link and I'll give you options to enable them. Once you have them enabled, you want to link your devices. Now you need a Tuya account for this, so click Link Devices by App and click Add App Account. It will create a QR code. Open Tuya app on your phone and scan this code, and there you have it, you are authorized. Within seconds you should see a device list. Now to see it on your Tuya account, you have to switch back to Tuya apps account. Select your register account user ID and the correct region, and you'll see all the devices that are linked to this account. And now you can start working with these. Now on this page itself, you'll also see the device IDs, the product IDs, which are different for each product, and some general information. Additionally, you can also get standard function set and state set that is available for each device. So that's a very useful in terms of obtaining information about commands and predicting what sort of data you can obtain from individual devices. This is all also explained in a very elaborate developer documentation. Now there's plenty of different information in here, and most of it is over my head, but don't worry, what we actually need is well explained and located in a cloud development. If you navigate to cloud development, you'll also be given a quick start guide, API user guide, and standard instruction set, which we're going to be using. Now for this, you probably want to use Postman. And if you're interested, just skip ahead to NodeRED, and if you don't want to learn more about how API and REST request works, but I would strongly recommend you to stay with me for the Postman overview, because it's an excellent tool to learn how to work with APIs and requests and how to make your life much easier, especially that Tuya Cloud prepared JSON files to work with So in the documentation and in the associated article of mine, you'll find the links to download JSON files for Postman. This means that you can simply import, using the import function, your collection of sample requests that you can test your cloud connection with. Now, that's the first thing that you have to import. The second thing that you have to import are set of environmental variables. Now, these will need to be selected in here and filled in as required. I already cover where to find all that information in my article as well, but briefly, if you look at the variable names, you'll see that they are very similar to the variables or the data you have provided on the device list and in a project overview. Additional information you'll also find in linked devices like your user ID. So fill those in as required, as this is how Postman works. It will basically use that set of the variables to fill in the gaps provided in the collections. So for example, when we have, for example, get the function list, you'll notice that it will ask you for variable URL, and it will, in this case, get functions for all devices that start with DJ in terms of the type name. Now, in order to use that, you have to select the correct environment, and for this I'm using Tuya environment, and that environment has all my details filled in. To work with SDK and Cloud API, you need to first authenticate yourself. Tuya does that by sending an encrypted message with your credentials to generate access token. This access token is only valid for a specific amount of times, usually a couple of hours or a little bit more depending on this configuration, and you can reset this and refresh it using refresh token action. Now, to try out, providing you filled in your URL with a specific region, I'm using Europe, you can simply send that request. You'll see your access token and everything generated at the bottom, and those are valid credentials. Should you use them now with your API call, they will work just fine. Now, a really nice thing that I like about Postman is the fact that it will generate most of the code that you're using for your individual programming languages in here. So you can select what kind of language you're working with. In my case, in NodeRED is JavaScript jQuery, and it'll provide me with pretty much everything I need to send that request. That's really handy, and it's a good benefit of working with Postman. Now that I have the access token, I can start actually pulling information from my account. So in order to receive that information, I need to get the device list by user ID. I already specified the user ID, the UI ID in my variables. Just make sure you're selecting them in a correct environment. So all I have to do is just to send that request. Once the request is processed, you'll see that JSON file that I have in here, and it will list all the devices I have associated with my account with some basic values, statuses, etc. You can copy and paste that in a Notepad+ for better understanding on resize this, or generate that as a different text type. You can see I have a light in here which is specified ID, so I'm gonna grab this ID and I'll show you how to manually change the ID for a quick lookup. So let's say I want to get information about this device. I'm selecting get information, and you'll see that I have to provide device ID. I can either modify that device ID variable or simply delete this, enter my device ID and send the request. Now on send, I'll receive all the information about my device only, and this is information about this specific device. Now this information will contain information about its state, information about some values that are being applied, and possible different values that I can apply to this device. Now if I want to receive information about the device, for example like a sensor that has a data points, then I will use get device data points instead, and it works in a very similar way. In this case, it provides me with the same information. However, if that was, for example, a device like a sensor, it would provide me with the history of the sensor data. If I want to send the commands, then I would have to generate a command for the information and send it. And that's being handled by post send device commands. You'll see that I need device ID and then commands to specify. So if I paste the device ID in this case and send this, you will see that the command is not supported because I've not specified correct command for this action. you'll see that my data is for switch, not for the light, and I've turned it to true, which is not correct standard. So how do you know what to send? Well, we have to refer back to the documentation. Now, if you navigate to documents and then go to standard instruction set, it will give you an overview of what you can send. In, for example, lighting category, you'll notice that it contains some of the information about lights. If you click on the standard instruction set, it will give you information how to handle the lights and what kind of information you should send in order to send them correctly. Also, there will be instructions with examples that you can use. So if you want to set different values, and the command should look like that. But for this tutorial, I only wanted it to switch it on. So let's do this. I'm gonna copy this sample code. It's gonna be switch LED and set it to true. Now I have to change that data structure to reflect this. I can do it in a body section of the request. You'll see all I have to do is just select this, delete it, paste the new one, and send the request. And now the lights are on. Those are located in the kitchen, so we won't be able to see it, but as I can see from the result and the successor, it responded well. Now that you are more familiar with Postman and how to find information in documentation and the cloud platform, let's switch over to NodeRED, and I'll show you how to recreate this in NodeRED so you could actually use it in your home automation. Don't panic, I know it looks like a lot, but it's actually quite simple. So let's start with authentication. We need to get access token. And I know what your question is. How do you get an access token? Well, you need a timestamp. Then this is a settings node that you'll have to fill in. In a section on start, you'll have to provide all the information that it asks you to, but then it'll use that information to actually generate the data needed to be encrypted and sent to Tuya Cloud. So in this case, we're taking a client ID and a time. Well, once we've got this, we're going to encrypt that using this node in here. So if you go to Manage Palette, you'll see that there's a Crypto.js dynamic, and we're using SHA-256. And then we make then we use the secret from the account, from the Tuya account, to encrypt the message and construct our header. That header then is obviously set and sent via GET to that URL, and the note on the URL. I'm in Europe, so I'm using European version. But if you have a different locale or region, just use the one that you use on your Tuya account. Now that we have all that and we send it, and then there's a function node that's going to basically create a variable that we can access later with access token and refresh token. And you probably ask, what is refresh token? Well, access token has a lifespan, and if this expires, then you want to send the refresh token to refresh access token and give us a new refresh token. And you can do that by running the second one. It's pretty much everything the same, except this runs automatically once a day and refreshes the data and writes new access token and a refresh token, so we can process all our usual requests for data and for commands. So let's get to exciting bits. First, we probably want a device list. So again, it's the same thing. We need a timestamp. We're going to prep our encryption, encrypt it, and then get our request constructed. This time we're going to use access token. So once you have your header constructed, you'll notice that we're sending a message to a URL that requires user ID, which was previously set in this first prep encrypt on start method. So this is very important that you set that user ID. And then once the request is done, for every device that you have associated with your account, I'm creating a flow variable, and it's going to be accessible here. So you can see I have lots of the devices in here, and each one has a device ID that you can use later to get device status. So let's do that. To get the device status, again, timestamp, encryption, then we need to use the device ID to specify where we're getting the status from, and then compose our request. We're just going to use headers, and its method get, and then it uses that device ID in URL to get that information. So when you click, for example, this is for my FingerBot, you'll notice that I get FingerBot information, and the status of it is going to be in here with different settings, etc. So now that I have it down, that you know how to do it with all that metadata, let's talk about data points. What's the difference is? Data points are only the status section here. So if you, for example, have a sensor and you're not interested in any of that, you can simply ask for the data points. And if I do that, you'll notice that on my temperature sensor, I've got data points. So I have a brightness, I have a battery, I have current temperature, humidity, etc. So this is the difference between the data points and the status. And lastly, let's talk about controlling this thing. So for controlling, it's a very similar experience. It's just except for the device ID, there is also a command that we have to set. And this command just pastes a JSON in here, which you want to send, and that's going to be constructed and sent as a payload when making your URL request. Obviously your URL request is going to be post, and we're going to be using the device ID. So if you want to turn it was on, if I remember correctly, if you want to turn it off, you're going to run the second command. You could hear it in the background where I run my switch to set to false, and now if I'm going to run my status, it should respond that the actual status for this device is false. So let's take a look. There you have it, my switch is false. Now if I want to turn it on and run that request again, you'll notice that my switch should be on. And there you have it. That's how you control your devices in NodeRED. Now if you want all of that, you don't want to write it yourself, and then head to my website and download it at the end of the article. You'll have this flow accessible for you. If you're asking me, it's all about flexibility. I am a big supporter of having your services stored locally so you don't have to share that information with third party, but I'm not strictly against using cloud. After all, I'm using Alexa and Google Home devices at home, so it's not like my environment is cloud free. The only question that you should answer yourself is it beneficial to your situation? If the answer is yes, well, maybe it's not worth being stubborn about not using cloud because cloud is evil, and actually taking advantage of whatever it's out there to suit your needs. I would like to thank Tuya for sponsoring this video and making their Cloud API quite accessible. Thanks to their work and documentation, it's actually quite easy to work with, and whatever you're gonna learn and take out from this video can be applicable to different services. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you do have any questions, you can find a little bit more information in an article associated with this video, link in the description of course, or just ask me in the comment section. As for now guys, you do know that I do not have a posting schedule, so if you want to follow me and find out what's next, well, you know how YouTube works. Definitely not going to explain that to you. But what I'm going to say, I have a bunch of social media that should really check out because I post some cool stuff that is not available elsewhere. So thanks so much for watching and see you next time. Bye.